We have seen a variety of Xenomorphs in the Alien franchise over the years, but the scariest thing about them is that they surprise us with new details every time. While some Xenomorphs might seem superior to the others, it won't be surprising to see one manage to be more brutal. Before we look at the terrifying Xenomorphs that have appeared in the wide variety of media from the Alien franchise, let's take a look at what a Xenomorph is and what some of their standard features are, so that we know how each aspect was bettered over time and turned into a more ruthless feature. We warn you that this list can get crazy. Some Xenomorphs even have wings. Before we go into explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. The thing about Xenomorphs. Steven Spielberg might have made several attempts to make aliens friendly, but it wouldn't have had a substantial impact, considering that Ridley Scott had flipped the idea entirely. The director saw Star Wars and decided to go for a horror feature that will entirely change how we perceive the extraterrestrial creatures, and that's when he ended up creating one of the most terrifying creatures in cinema history, with the idea that it haunts you down in the emptiness of space, where not a single soul can hear you scream. Well, that's something you don't forget easily. Soon, the film spawned a franchise, with the studio giving us sequels and other media inspired by the basic concept. It's pretty amazing to see the limits to which this concept could be taken. Even though these creatures have been pitted against various others in the franchise and have had significant developments in their lore, the basic idea about them has always been the same. The most important part about them is that they can change their physiology based on the host they gestate inside, which helps the grown-up creature survive in the environment where it is born. If you're wondering what gestate inside a host means, it's quite simple. One of the essential parts of a Xenomorph's life cycle involves being planted inside a host, which can be a human being or any other such life form, and it will soon burst out of them and grow into a full-sized creature. Most of the Xenomorphs were encountered have primarily gestated inside humans, which is why they have features that adhere to the human form, but there have been times when other creatures have changed the look and feel of these creatures. But there's one more detail about aliens that makes them a genuinely crazy god's gift to humanity. The Xenomorphs have acidic blood. Yes, you heard me right. These creatures that pose a significant threat to humankind have acidic blood and often use it to their benefit when facing off against a human. And don't forget the pharyngeal jaw, which is a tiny mouth that pops out of their mouth and can break through most metal and even skulls, killing their target in the flick of a finger. Over the years, we have encountered various Xenomorphs based on the different genetics of the host they were popped out of. And with time, each film has tried to make them more horrifying. But while time might have played a role in their evolution, there have been chances where certain vital elements played a central role in their look and feel, as well as terror. But in the midst of all these, Xenomorphs are the kind that are bloodthirsty and have a 100% chance of killing you under any circumstance unless you're Ripley. The Queen. One of the most essential species among Xenomorphs is the Queen, who primarily serves as the mother of the Xenomorph hive, and yes, these Xenomorphs truly serve as queens, considering they are huge, solid, and the most innovative kind of creature. Even though they are more into the workings of the hive and looking after how they work, these creatures are the most formidable opponents in the battles, and it is quite a unique experience if you come across them, because getting rid of them is not an easy task. Apart from being such formidable enemies, the Queen often exhibits behavioral patterns that clarify that they are here to take revenge and serve their wrath. Even this monster's appearance is like that of a queen, considering it has a large armored crown-like carapace on its head that allows it to draw in its face and mouth, acting like protection. When she fought off Ripley in 1986's Aliens, one could see that her razor-sharp, transparent teeth were comparatively larger than most other Xenomorphs, and it could fit an entire head inside its jaw. Even though Ripley managed to fight this one off in the 1986 film, she would end up carrying a queen inside her in Alien 3 because a facehugger managed to get on her ship and plant a chest burster inside her while she was in stasis. So yes, Ripley almost has a unique connection with this Xenomorph, as both have gone against each other quite a few times, with Ripley witnessing a connection with her at various points of their encounters. So it is quite clear that they differ significantly from the basic Xenomorph designs, and they have some fantastic features that can make them an absolute nightmare. Apart from their primary limbs, the Queen has 2 other arms that extend from its chest, which only adds to their ability to grab their prey. Even though they provide a larger surface area at which one can aim and fire, they manage to survive most such attacks and can survive through several rounds of fire before being put down. Now, the one thing that will surely scare you is that the life cycle of these creatures is relatively fast, and a queen can give birth to 15 eggs in an hour. So, if you have a queen Xenomorph in your ship, you know an army of aliens will kill you anytime now. Predalien. Remember when we said that one of the essential aspects of the Xenomorph is that its genetics changes based on the life form it grows inside of? Now imagine a Xenomorph growing inside one of the most dangerous hunter species in the universe, the Predator. The worlds of Predators and aliens have been tied up quite often, and fans of the Predator franchise might remember a Xenomorph skull appearing inside the ship of these hunters, and that's it. Thus began the journey towards a project that pits them against each other. Even though the Predator managed to kill the Xenomorph, some facehugger must have gotten hold of him, leading to the Predalien's birth. The most notable features of the Predalien, which is from the Predator host, are the lack of the typical extensively skeletal form of the Xenomorphs and a robust appearance along with the dreadlocks. Even though their bipedal form looks similar to most Xenomorphs, spawned off of humans, they look more prominent in size and have a vocalization identical to the Predators. Now, you might be wondering how to face such a creature. Well, you have to have a lot of experience to face off against this one, and then you might have some chances of survival. The Predalien has a lot of subcategories, such as the warrior-type Predalien, Praetorian Predalien, etc. Although most of us have seen the Predalien in the Alien vs. Predators Requiem film, the character design has varied significantly in its other appearances. But the best one has to be when the Predalien pops out of the Predator's chest if the alien baby finishing move is used against him. If these renditions are enough to creep you out, wait till you check out the next Xenomorph on the list. Offspring. Alien Ramulus might be the best thing that has happened to the Alien franchise in a long time, considering it managed to fill every trope of the original 2 films. While paying homage to them, it had elements of fear and a sense of adventure, while keeping up with some innovative ways of scaring us with some of the past favorites of the Aliens franchise. But the last thing that goes beyond our imagination in the film is the appearance of the Xenomorph, which has now been named Offspring. Rain Carradine and her friends were looking for a ship to help them escape their working colony, but they stepped onto something they did not know. With the multiple alien attacks amongst other things, the final thing that puts them off is just an attempt to save their pregnant friend Kay. Kay injected herself with the experimental fluid that had been taken from the Xenomorphs to help humans survive harsh conditions, like these creatures managed to. But what the kids didn't know was that the fluid was unstable, and it had resulted in some rather monstrous results when experimented upon a rat. For Kay, the fluid affects her fetus, and we see that she ends up laying an egg, which results in one of the scariest creatures to have happened to the Alien franchise. The Offspring is a human Xenomorph hybrid with the structure of a human that has grown abnormally tall, but with eyes and skin that make them the most terrifying thing you would have ever seen. This creature continues to grow large and retains some of the features of the Xenomorph, including the tail. If you've seen the movie, the visual of the Offspring crawling through the corridor while looking straight ahead is something that you won't forget that easily. Even though Rain manages to get rid of it through a process that might look impossible, there is a clear chance that if this creature dominates, it will be the scariest thing that has happened to the Xenomorph species. Protomorph. Certain species can act as gods, and that's one of the underlying themes of the Alien franchise, as the humans tried to take control when they learned about the engineers. Suppose you managed to put some aspects of the genetics of another creature into the Xenomorph. In that case, it will exhibit features that will make it much scarier than one can imagine. Protomorphs might be the Xenomorph kind that looks most similar to the original aliens we have seen, yet they result from experiments conducted by Weyland Yutani's rogue synthetic human David. David. David managed to mix the tissue samples harvested from Elizabeth Shaw, the deceased engineers, and the Xenomorphs that had spawned from the native species in Planet 4. It wasn't an easy process, but over the years, he was secluded on the planet. He managed to create several ovomorphs that resulted in the facehuggers, which would spawn the Protomorph. Even though they look like Xenomorphs, certain features distinguish them, including the more transparent organs and bone-based teeth instead of the metal teeth that the Xenomorphs have. Now, they are quite a lot faster and even supposed to be more formidable, but then they aren't smart enough to use these elements of their characteristic in battle. They would go for kill even if they come across a Xenomorph, stopping at nothing to kill everything it faces in front of it. Even though it hasn't been seen yet, according to Ridley Scott, the Protomorphs can recover from their injuries quickly, making them almost indestructible. Newborn. This one could be the Xenomorph closest to the Offspring, but that similarity is only regarding its appearance being farthest from the Xenomorphs and closer to the humans. Remember the Axeman from the Resident Evil franchise? Well, the Newborn is surprisingly much closer than the other Xenomorphs, but that is clearly because of the crazy and bizarre story given to this creature, which resulted from an experiment involving Ripley's clone. Alien 3 saw the death of Ripley as she sacrificed herself when she discovered that Weyland-Yutani would have used the Queen that was inside her for their purposes. But that didn't stop Weyland-Yutani as they managed to get a hold of her DNA, to clone her, and recreate her to access the Xenomorph that was growing inside her. Talk about the importance of a character leading to the franchise, forcing her to make a comeback with a crazy plot. While the Ripley clone managed to acquire some of the features of the Xenomorph, the cloned Queen ceased laying eggs, and she had to get a womb instead where the Newborn was developed. The Newborn was not a regular Xenomorph birth like a chest burster, but it was much more human and emerged in the hive. It appeared to have a facial structure much more similar to the humans, as its face had an exoskeleton identical to the humans. This humanoid looked scary, but what shook us was that right after it emerged, it managed to kill the Queen by ripping her face off with a simple swapping with her hand. Even though it was born out of the Queen's womb, it treated Ripley's clone as its mother, and the two had a lot of emotional moments, which were quite weird, but they did show that the Newborn exhibited these emotions. Many people say that they heard the Newborn scream, "Help me," or "Mommy," when it was dying at the end of the Alien Resurrection, but it was never confirmed. If you think they did, that makes the creature much scarier than most of the Xenomorphs that we've witnessed so far. King Alien. Not all of these Xenomorphs have made it into the final films, but they are based on rejected ideas or concepts that would later appear in their completed forms in other projects. The Newborn was intended to appear in Alien 3, but the plans were cancelled, and the sequel gave it a crazy origin story. We have seen the Queen, but the King hasn't appeared in the franchise yet. It is also known as the Monstrosity, which explains its appearance and character design. Even though they are similar to the Queen cast, their priority is combat instead, while the Queen's objective is egg-laying. The creature was designed to be a more masculine version of the Queen Xenomorph. The King's design is very similar to the Queen's, including the head crest, but its bulkier and heavier body structure makes it a scarier opponent for humans. The Queen also had some ventral arms that weren't present with the King. When it comes to height, they can be smaller than the Queen, but if they are big, they will be larger by a few stories. Even though all these aspects makes it feel like it will have quite a difficult time when it moves, it can be relatively swift and mobile, surprising the opponent who has assumed otherwise. Again, this character was one of the concepts first brought in the earlier drafts of the script for Alien 3, and they had many more abilities planned for the creature. It was supposed to camouflage itself like a chameleon, and it could also implant chest bursters into its victims directly without the facehuggers. If you were scared of the Queen, you have the King to look out for now. If only it could appear in one of the future films, show itself, and give us a practical look at its abilities. Goddess. Now we're jumping into a new territory regarding the kinds of Xenomorphs. They may be imaginary beings that are there to psychologically affect the humans who have had some traumatic experience with Xenomorphs, but the Goddess, also known as the One in the Dark, has appeared in the dreams of certain individuals, and some people have even witnessed her before their deaths. In the Alien Bloodlines comic books, Gabriel Cruz and his crew are attacked by the Xenomorph species. Cruz gets cocooned and most of his crew gets slaughtered. After Cruz was rescued and taken to Epsilon, the chest burster was extracted from his body and he managed to survive the ordeal. But what remained with him were the visions and nightmares of a xenomorph that looked much evolved and was trying to seek him. He would take the help from one of the synthetic bishops to identify the significance of this figure. That's when he will discover more about his connection with the Xenomorphs. As the creature would indirectly come in contact with him at various times, other survivors would tell him of a similar figure that had been asking for him until finally Iris, a synthetic sleeper agent, would be the one to tell him about the goddess. The goddess was supposed to be the idea of a fresh slate in the galaxy after the humans had discovered the Xenomorph species. This creature didn't make a complete appearance in the story, but it was indicated that many others saw similar visions. That makes the character much more terrifying than some other Xenomorphs we have already seen. Even the character designs felt like something much more faithful to the artwork of H.R. Giger, which made it even more haunting. White Hybrid Xenomorph. If you thought the Pred aliens were scary, you should look at this exhibit. It is one of the most beautiful yet dangerous creatures ever seen. The White Hybrid Xenomorph results from a hybrid that has the traits of the Yautja, the predator tribe, humans, and of course, Xenomorphs. Luckily, it took the best traits of humans and gave them increased intelligence due to the combined intelligence of humans and predators. Even though they should have more aspects of humans and predators, they align with their species' dangerous and gory aspects by having acidic blood and using the same method as the other Xenomorphs regarding reproduction. So, the facehuggers persist in this species of creature. However, considering that the predators are good at handling weapons and are much more advanced, this hybrid can also use guns and have speech, but is hostile to both the predators and the Xenomorphs. The Jockey Xenomorph. The engineers have been a vital part of the Xenomorph arc and present since the first film in the franchise, 1979's Alien. They were responsible for many events in this universe, and one of the significant things among these would be pitting the humans and Xenomorphs against each other. These beings were larger than humans and had somewhat humanoid structures, except their eyes looked soulless, making them daunting and large. Even though it sounds like a relatively chill Xenomorph, the Jockey Xenomorph is born from an engineer. Born from an engineer space jockey, the creature immediately went into killing the human-spawned Xenomorphs, and it is quite the fighter as it managed to slay most of the hive all by itself. This brown Xenomorph that is massive in size was set to appear in Ridley Scott's Prometheus, but it was cancelled at the last moment and replaced by another Xenomorph that would be called Deacon. It was supposed to be called the Ultramorph, and it was supposed to kill Jocelyn Watts after the Juggernaut was destroyed. It does make one wonder about the number of these creatures that were all set to appear in the movies, and it suggests that the filmmakers were ready to take the concept to crazy and brutal limits. Alpha. Yeah, it might not be the alpha amongst the Xenomorphs, but it does have an appearance that puts it above most of the other Xenomorphs. You might remember Gabriel Cruz and his troops, who the Xenomorphs apprehended and cocooned. So after being rescued, this unique-looking Xenomorph was taken out of him as a chest burster. Turned out to be a massive hulking Xenomorph with a genetic structure that involved both human DNA and the DNA of a Korokran Highland goat, which does explain the horns it has that make it look like it has spawned from an extinct species of wild bison. This creature would make its objective to apprehend Gabriel Cruz, and the fact that it was born from Gabriel Cruz could be why the goddess was looking for him. Maybe she had plans to use Cruz for other such Xenomorphs so that they could dominate the universe and bring in whole new species that could easily dominate humans. It's wild how the Alpha was almost the first Xenomorph that Weyland-Yutani had managed to get their hands on. The corporation didn't get the lessons regarding its tendency to fail at these missions, and well, the Alpha was probably the finest example of how the Xenomorphs also had their plans going on. Drone. The drones are the warriors amongst the Xenomorphs, primarily working under the Queen. They are the most commonly seen Xenomorphs, and that's why this one is the kind we've seen the most. They might not be that daunting considering the multiple encounters, but a horde of them is something you might want to avoid. Even though they are human spawns, they can't be in the bipedal form or go on all fours. Regarding their intelligence, Ash, the synthetic from Weyland-Yutani, had observed that they are as intelligent as a dog or a chimpanzee, thus making them comparatively easy to deal with. But when they are working under stealth, they can outsmart the humans, and that could be something that can be rather dangerous if you're taking them for a joke. Also, these drones can often turn into queens or the higher castes of the Xenomorphs, evolution based on certain conditions regarding their environment. Runner. Alien 3 might not be David Fincher's best work, but the movie stands out amongst most of the Alien films we have gotten over the years. According to the movie, Ripley accidentally got one of the facehuggers onto her ship, and when the ship crashed into a planet, the facehugger found a dog and made it the host of the chestburster. So the runner resulted from this and might be the xenomorph with the most minor features in common with a host. The creature has more in common with humans than a dog, and even Ridley Scott called this one the man version of the aliens. Other questionable features of this creature include intelligence, which is questionable for a dog if we consider that the host endows this offspring with features. Now, the only thing that we could see that the runner had in common with a dog was the quadruped posture. But don't take this one lightly either, because it managed to kill almost the entirety of a colony. Praetorian. Even though there is much confusion regarding the life cycle of a xenomorph, the Praetorian is probably the most advanced being, one of the final stages of the traditional life cycle of a xenomorph. It is also known as the Royal Guard. The Praetorian hardly does much apart from operating from their hive grounds, and even though they do resemble some aspects of the Queen, they are not as tall and stand somewhere in between them and the typical xenomorphs. Even though it might look simple because of their unexplained and crazy life cycles, the xenomorphs have quite a complicated process. They result from a selection process where the Queen picks certain xenomorphs to be the Praetorian, and they're fed royal jelly to undergo the transformation. But then comes the real part, where the Queen releases a pheromone that turns the xenomorphs against these selected ones so that they can battle it out. Even though most of them get killed, the surviving ones would become tougher, taking their seat next to the Queen as the Royal Guard. Irradiated Xenomorph. An exciting mix of xenomorphs has appeared on this list so far, but then there's one that might have a feature that sets it a bit more apart from the others in terms of appearance. Even though most of the features of the xenomorphs are a result of their interesting genetic structure, this xenomorph emits a bioluminescent blue color due to the result of exposure to the nuclear winter. That was because of the destruction of Hadley's Hope atmosphere processing plant. This event also affected the creature's blood as it became more like a substance similar to liquid nitrogen and produced burns that look cryogenic. You must agree that even though these creatures can be an absolute nightmare, they have some of the most remarkable character designs. Flying Queen. If you thought you could get away from a xenomorph on foot, you haven't seen this xenomorph yet, considering they managed to adopt one more ability that can make them a much more severe threat to the human. There is no clear indication of how it came to this, except that someone thought about adding this exciting aspect. The Flying Queen has large membrane wings that are almost like bats, allowing them to fly. Yes, flying xenomorphs is a thing, and even though that's the last thing we put on this list, it is not something you will forget. Now, this rendition of the xenomorph has appeared in multiple media and other alien-related items, but they haven't been explored properly yet. Maybe Noah Hawley will hear about this and work it into his prequel series to give us an exciting nightmare. Marvelous verdict. If you look at the variety of xenomorphs, it becomes clear that there is an order to them, and each year a new one gets added to this list. Even though most of them don't get to have a more extended appearance in comparison to the typical xenomorphs, they do manage to hit the mark with an exciting development attached to them. Now that more alien projects are lined up, we can expect to see more of these developments that prove that the creators aren't holding back. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.